أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. First of all, I must recognize the presence of a glittering galaxy of Pakistani writers. But in fact, this is not one galaxy. This is a numerous galaxies that have collected here. And I congratulate the Pakistan Academy of Letters for having given them honor and allowed them to glitter in the public eye. I have recited these verses of the Holy Quran which refer to knowledge in order to set for myself a framework for this lecture on the interconnectedness perspective between poetry and art, knowledge and life. Before reverting to the subject, sincere felicitations to the inspiring presence of Dr. Najeeba Arif Sahiba, and I must commend her for her dynamic leadership in the Pakistan Academy of Letters. My felicitation and admiration for the Secretary, Jami Saab, for having won the confidence of the conscience of the people of Pakistan, the writers of Pakistan. But I must also recognize the presence of the Kamal-e-Fan awardee and my friend Badini Saab. Believe me, sir, I am particularly happy to recognize this much respected Baluchi scholar Munir Ahmed Badini Saab, who writes in Baluchi, Urdu, as well as marvelously in the English language. This diversity of accomplishment is a model for the younger generation of this country. I have read some of his works. I was not even aware of the colossal contribution that he has made to a number of disciplines, from psychology to philosophy to literature, in a sense confirming the theme that I have today, which is this interrelationship and interrelatedness between life and literature and knowledge. Recently I read his book, The Whispers of River Ravi, which is a masterly narrative blending life, art, and philosophy. This echoes with the theme in my own lecture. His art reminds me, sir, of a very important 20th century literary critic who was discovered late because he wrote in Russian and he had that famous culture of being an emigre, of suffering, and then suddenly his works came to light. And his name is Mikhail Bakhtin. Mikhail Bakhtin was himself a revelation for me. And his art consists in dialogue, as he said, dialogue with the writer's age and beyond. His view of art was to communicate with different world views through a number of voices, rather resembling the art of Dostoevsky. This basically led to the self-realization of the uniqueness of every human individual through identity with the community, identity with other voices of humankind. Happily, while this is an illustration of my own theme in this lecture, I must commend Badini Sahab's contribution to the world of literature and express my joy at his presence in this meeting. To revert to the verses of the Holy Quran, the key terms and themes in the text of Surah Al-Alaq may be paraphrased as follows: that the creation of human life out of virtual nothingness is by the volition and design of the divine creator. Second, that the human capacity for attaining knowledge, is also a gift from the Creator to humankind. Thirdly, that knowledge essentially unfolds a reality that is otherwise hidden or latent, both in the universe and inside the human constitution. Fourthly, that knowledge helps to bridge the gulf that ostensibly separates the manifest from the hidden, the ghaib from the shahada. One can refer to this as the search of reality behind reality in the world that we encounter. That search is taking place, in my view, in the whole spectrum of knowledge seeking. In the physical sciences, that is physics and chemistry and biology and others. In the social sciences like history, politics, anthropology, psychology, and you notice that I stress the word politics. It's a discipline that needs to be studied and is studied as a discipline. Anthropology, psychology, and religion. It is also taking place in the aesthetic disciplines that essentially explore the import and impact on our lives of the power of truth and the truth of power, of the spellbinding power of beauty in our lives and the life-nourishing spirituality that elevates and purifies us through the phenomenon of love. And going beyond the individual's remit, extending to the human passion for freedom of our fellow men, for their dignity, and for justice and equity as the collective goals of humankind. Goals as well as dreams. Goals as well as dreams, as well as the passion which is reflected in the history of mankind. About art's role in the search of reality, may I quote from the Nobel laureate Saul Bellow: "Only art permeates the seeming realities of the world. But there is another reality, a genuine one, which we lose sight of. This other reality is always sending us hints which without art we cannot receive." I believe that a wide consensus exists today in all spheres of knowledge, the physical, the mental, the social, and the aesthetic, that the interconnecting glue for the plurality of the forms of knowledge is that marvelous, that miraculous, and that mysterious presence of the human consciousness that is the real gift of God, and for which, sir, I've read a lot of, I'm interested in reading the mind and letters of the super scientists of today. And they say, when writing books on science, that everything else we know a little bit of, but human consciousness remains an enigma. And in physics, it is known as the great problem of human consciousness. So what is this? It's a unique and ineffable flame that has come for our understanding of ourselves, Why human consciousness? It is a flame given to us like a torch so that we can understand ourselves and our society. Ourselves as the site for absorption of knowledge, a site for that transforms itself as a unit of time and space, but which displays a capacity to transcend all time and all space. The capacity of transcendence, ladies and gentlemen, is, in my view, the hallmark of human consciousness. In today's age of quantum physics, it is this interconnectedness between human consciousness and the world of matter that breaks up the wave function today, making it collapse to give cosmic energy the form and shape of mundane matter. And I refer to the works of Schrödinger and Heisenberg, super scientists. They are the people who spoke of this particle and wave function. And they are the people who brought out this tremendous principle of uncertainty. We who felt very strongly about the firmness of Newtonian matter, today we understand it only through the principle of uncertainty that these great scientists have brought about. In modern physics, the hard problem of consciousness, it remains a miracle and a mystery, evoking wonder and awe at the quantum events that are taking place in nature and within ourselves as human beings. It is responsible for our sense of beingness and our sense of belongingness and the interconnectedness between the domains of knowledge and ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, let me clarify at this point that this is not going to be an academic lecture. I would be very naive to attempt such an exercise in the 20 minutes or so that are at my disposal, so I will restrict myself as a humble practitioner of Pakistani verse, English verse, to convey to this august audience my understanding of poetry itself being a form of knowledge. That poetry itself is a form of knowledge that benefits from other streams and other sources of knowledge. The new approach to sources of knowledge, in my mind, lies at the heart of what I'm going to say. Today, knowledge implies sources, and the widening of the very concept of the sources of knowledge, that lies at the heart of our understanding of ourselves through letters, through poetry. I wish to share my view very clearly that poetry is more powerful than other disciplines in extracting the essence of life, and more effective in training consciousness as an agent of change and transformation. I spoke of transcendence through its power of transcendence. Poetry has been described as, and I quote, the supreme instrument of self-knowledge. Based on my readings on the subject of art and life, I have come to believe that poetry, like all forms of literature and art, is no longer a luxury or a refuge from the world, a negation of life, but today it is a necessity for the understanding of the essence of life. It's a necessity. Poetry, it has been asserted, is essential for man's meaningful survival. May I repeat the words? Poetry is essential for man's meaningful survival rather than merely being a supplement to cultural existence. It's not just a supplement to a cultural existence. And I went through this debate which took place recently in America between three kinds of poets: the formalists, secondly the myth-based poets, and thirdly the pluralists of the Chicago School. And I believe that the common feature, and the one that is to be stressed most, is the importance of the self-realization of the uniqueness of every individual as a life citizen, as a citizen of life. We are citizens of life. And that was the common feature that came out of that debate. Poetry in our times has been invested with a distinct role, that of being a meeting place of conversation among all significant disciplines of knowledge. And for this, I'm very indebted to Rukeyser. Rukeyser is a poet of great dimensions in American literature. And she says that today, poetry is a platform which brings together all disciplines of knowledge. But it is important that a conversation should take place. We are busy trying to determine what conversation and with whom should take place for our simple verities. But today, in the cosmic world of literature and in the creative world of literature, the challenge is how to bring this entire knowledge into the body frame of poetry for the glory of mankind. So this is a very famous book by Muriel Rukeyser. It is called The Life of Poetry. And I believe that this thought that I'm sharing with you is not my own, but I do believe that the challenge of an interrelationship, of an interrelatedness between disciplines is really tackled by poetry for creating the essence of life and understanding the essence of life. I'll try and complete what I'm saying, but I would like just to quote a line from Muriel Rukeyser. A poem today is not in its words and images, but in a moving relationship between the individual consciousness and the world. Again, that stress on consciousness that I believe was very important. I'm going to restrict my lecture only to two aspects, which I will bring out and then beg leave from you. The first is to understand, as writers, what are the challenges to this question of interconnectedness between disciplines that I have raised and which Muriel has raised and which all the schools of poetry have raised today. And I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, through these 5 literary snapshots that I will present before you to bring out what the challenge is in this connection of interconnectedness, what I call the interconnectedness challenge. And the solution I give is the extension, the widening of the concept of the sources of knowledge. Now, as far as the challenge is concerned, may I refer to Raphael's painting, the famous painting, The School of Athens. So in that, you have Plato raising his hand at the heaven, the sky, and Aristotle walking with him, but his hand is to the earth. This gulf between the heaven and the earth, believe me, no other discipline can plug this gulf except the power of poetry. And therefore this is the first challenge of harmonization between the celestial and the terrestrial. And that's the challenge that is there. Then I refer you to another little snapshot. You must have heard of Paul Gauguin. Paul Gauguin is a 20th century painter. And his famous painting is called, Where Do We Come From? Where are we going? Where are we going? And honest to God, as a humble student of knowledge, I have no answer in physics. I have no answer in chemistry. I have no answer in the social disciplines. And these are very important matters. Yes, you can put them under the carpet and forget about death. But here in this picture, on one side is an old woman reaching the portal of death. On the other are children playing. And so this concept of bringing together life and death in a meaningful fashion, that is the challenge of the interconnectedness between knowledge in the wider sense and human experience. Sir, may I refer to Sadiq, the 20th century painter of Pakistan that we are proud of. His murals and calligraphic forms have in its breadth the whole of civilization. The Egyptian, the Sumerian, the British, the American, the Pakistani, the Indus Valley. He has the grasp of all that, and the performance, he's proud of the performance of human beings in civilizations. But yet, there is some of the names, the treasures of time, the quest of knowledge, the saga of labor. At the same time, so in his work there are the Crow series, the Cobweb series, the Cactus series, which show the darkness that we must face in order to produce light. You cannot just produce light out of nothing. You have to drive out darkness to produce light, and that is the power of poetry. Can I refer to one more giant, a universal giant of the 18th century, Beethoven? You know, Beethoven wanted to commit suicide. He was in a sense of despair. He wanted really, because of his personal distress and public distress, the wars had started, the Napoleonic Wars and others. He was brokenhearted and he wanted to commit suicide. Then suddenly he got a revelation and he read that Ode of Joy by the German poet Schiller, who also greatly affected Iqbal and Goethe and others. And you know, sir, what he did? He turned his sorrow, he turned his misery, he turned his despair into joy, because he said joy is something which is shareable. And believe me, the 9th Symphony of Beethoven is today considered to be, and what is this joy? He says, I get joy in finding that I can help in justice to the world. I can feel joy if I can share bread with the world. I can feel joy if I can feel the freedom of the people of the world. And that joy gave him the joy of existence. Sir, it is art that can bring the magic of joy. You can have any other ambition in life, it will be temporary. But the joy that comes from art is what it is. And final example I want to give is from another painting by Rembrandt, the great Rembrandt, who is a 17th century painter. And his painting is called, which I am referring to, the Anatomy Lesson. In this painting, there is medical students, a group of medical students, and they are ranged around a naked body, an open body. But the students, instead of looking at that body, the live experience, the living experience, the lived experience, they have all turned their attention to a book which is open at the foot of the cadaver. And so people say that this is a criticism that, you know, is the book the only source of knowledge and not the living experience of people, of the poor, of the suffering, of the sorrowful? Is that experience not a source of knowledge also? So this is a great gap that he has shown. But I like to be kindly to him. We are sitting in a place where people have produced books based upon living experience, and I'm sure that both are important. And there are critics who say that, in fact, Rembrandt was right to show people looking at the book. Book must contain the living and lived experience of human beings, but only a book will transmit it to the future. Otherwise, it will not become immortal, it will die. So I think that this is a great example of this inter. Ladies and gentlemen, I know I've taken a lot of your time, but I'm just going to read out a list of what is today considered sources of knowledge. And this is where we have plugged the gap between disciplines and brought about that bridge. Sir, there was a time that only reason and science and logic was considered to be, you know, the source of knowledge. But today, believe me, Emotion is supposed to be not just an accidental product in human beings, but there's a bit to you is considered to be the greatest poet of the 20th century, the greatest poem of the 20th century. And the third poem I'm going to quote to you and then beg leave is from Allama Iqbal. So these are 20th century poets and they talk about love. So have I created enough suspense to show that when I talk of interrelatedness, here are people. And when you look at the verse, I must say this in advance, these are great poets of the 20th century. But sir, when you look at Auden's view on love, it is just an intellectual view of love. The words I will tell you, but it is an intellectual view of love. Maya Angelou, the great poet, they call them the black poets somehow. I don't like the term. But this poet, believe me, leading poet of the world today. And when you read her poem on love, it is not only intellectual love, it is emotional, intellectual, and moral love. The moral dimension is there. But the greatness of Iqbal is another matter. Iqbal's view of love, and I will be quoting from the Javed Nama, not in Persian but in English translation. Sir, amazingly, talking of love not only as an intellectual force, not only as an emotional force, not only as a moral force, but what is more, a spiritual force. So this combination of the moral and the spiritual, of the physical and the emotional, that is the marvel that love in the broadest and the completest sense of the word can produce. So I will just read these poems to you and I will beg leave from you. And if I've been able to bring out that the aesthetic experience as given in these poems bring out different dimensions. But here is Mr. Auden, and he calls it, and it's a very important poem, the more loving one. He says, looking at the stars, I know quite well that for all they care, I can go to hell. But on earth, indifference is the least we have to dread from man and beast. How should we like it were the stars to burn with a passion for us we could not return? If equal affection cannot be, let the more loving one be me. What a beautiful poem. But you know, I find it a poem of the intellect, an intellectual poem. This is love in the intellectual sense. And there is a disconnect with nature. This nature, the stars, which are the food of the poet, for him, he says, they are indifferent and they have no meaning in my life. I have to create my own meaning. So this is one. Now the second poem is by Maya Angelou, 20th century again, and it's called A Brave and Startling Truth. We, the people on a small and lonely planet, traveling through casual space, pass aloof stars across the way of indifferent suns to a destination where all signs tell us it is possible and imperative that we learn a brave and startling truth. We, the people, on this mote of matter, in whose mouth abide cantankerous words which challenge the very existence, our very existence, yet out of these very mouths come songs of such exquisite sweetness that the heart falters in its labor and the body is quieted. When we come to it, we must confess that we are the possible, we are the miraculous, we are the wonder of the world. So there's a lot of respect for human beings, a respect for human wonder, and there is not only the intellect, but the moral and the emotional which comes here. But let me just end this episode and what I've been trying to say with the recitation from Allama Iqbal. This is from Javed Nama, which came out in 1932, and it is divided into two portions. One is called The Second Birth, and the other is called The Nothing Something Poem. The Nothing / Something Poem. So here is the second birth. Such a birth is not of water and clay. The first birth is by constraint. The second is by choice. The first is hidden in wails. The second is open like laughter. For the first is a seeking, and the second is a finding. The first is a need of night and day. The second is timeless. A child is born through the rending of a womb. A human being is born through the rending of this world. The call to prayer announces both births. The first is uttered by the lips, the second by the heart and the soul. And then the last bit, the Nothing Something Poem. And here, ladies and gentlemen, the difference is, it is not only the eye that matters in poetry, or should matter in poetry today. It is not only the head that should matter in poetry today. It is not only the head and the heart and the eye, and on all these Allama Iqbal has spoken and brought them together in his verse. He doesn't have an inimical view of these organs of the human spirit, not of the body of the, but he adds a dimension. He says, what is the use of greatness of head and heart and eye if the hand has not started taking action? So if you talk of justice, but the hand is not helping in justice, if the hand is not helping in love, what is the use of such a thing? And so listen to the anthem of Iqbal. This is not just his personal anthem. It is an anthem for humanity. It is a matter of pride for us that every writer in Pakistan is an inheritor of this tradition of spirituality. And you know, sir, for others, the spiritual is just an extension of the material. For Iqbal, no, he says the material is an extension of the spiritual. So, can you listen to this? And I will just beg leave, and with apologies for having taken so much time. The Nothing Something Poem. The science of the Westerners and the philosophy of the Easterners are all idol houses, and the visiting of the idols yields nothing. So, think of your own self's potential. Think of your own self's potential and pass not fearfully through the desert, for you truly are, and the substance of the two worlds is nothing. To be of the world and yet escape from it. To be of the world and yet escape from it, that is something. The paradise that some deity grants you is nothing. While the paradise which is the reward of your own strivings, that is something. Do you seek the repose of your souls? The soul's repose is nothing. The tear that you shed in sorrow of your fellow men. What a beautiful thought, sir. The tear that you shed in sorrow for your fellow man, that is something. The cheek's beauty lives for a moment and in another moment is gone. The beauty of aspiration and of action, that is something. Ladies and gentlemen, with these words, I thank the Academy for giving me an opportunity. Thank you.